without limits or judgment. A place for you and people like you to tell your most effed up stories.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I'm your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have with us Mark Brenner. He's going to be our guest and he's going to be talking with us about an experience he had involving aliens, UFOs, I should say more so UFOs, while he was in the military. Now before we jump into that, because it is a very interesting story that has a lot of interesting elements from the paranormal to conspiracies. But before we jump into that, I'd just like to remind our audience that if you have an effed up story of your own or a video, picture, anything on the paranormal or something of that nature, we would like you to submit it to us, which you can do at our official website at www.effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. Go to the menu, submissions, fill out the form, submit it. We'll get it. It'll probably end up on the website and possibly get you in one of our podcasts. And with that having been said, welcome, Mark, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Yeah, it's definitely, the pleasure is all ours. So, Mark, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start at the... I'm trying to figure, because I'm kind of familiar with your story, but of course it has a couple elements that doesn't, like the origin of it won't make sense until we get to the middle part. So, I mean, just give us a general overview of what this story entails.
Well, the story starts when I was a toddler. I started having my first round of, I guess, what you would call paranormal experiences. I woke up one morning. I was at my grandparents' house for the weekend in southern Mississippi, and I was staying in their basement. And I woke up one morning, and it was probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I noticed there was 3 figures in the room with me, and I could see them. And they were, I guess, what you would call your typical grays. And they were wearing hoods, and they seemed to speak to me in some form or fashion. I think I can't remember whether it was verbally or telepathically or whatever, but they were telling me to go with them, and that was a really odd experience. I didn't know what to make of it, and that was before I'd seen stuff on TV about aliens or watched Close Encounters of the First Kind or Rose of the Third Kind or any of those types of shows. And I kind of followed them. I got out of bed. I did what they told me to. They wanted me to go into this black door, which was inside the bathroom of the basement I was staying in, and I would not go with them. I was scared to death. And that was kind of the first thing I vividly remember happening as far as having experience with any type of these entities.
If I could just stop you for a second, Mark, this black door that you saw, this wasn't a normal door part of the house. This was something that manifested itself in the room.
Well, it was, there was a door to a crawl space, and it was black, but it seemed, I don't know if it was just because I was half asleep or if it was an illusion. It just seemed bigger. To me, as a child, it seemed a lot bigger.
So would you say essentially that these creatures were trying to lead you into a storage space?
It seemed to be, but I can't say whether or not, I can't say for sure whether or not they were trying to lead me in there to do something to me, or if if they were going to create some sort of illusion in there, to just put, I don't know what they were planning to do. I've heard so many different stories about these entities and what they are capable of, and there's really no telling. But all I know is I wouldn't go in there.
Okay, so that's your first experience, and I guess you got the sense that, a sense of fear that these entities were negative in some kind of way.
It was a tremendous sense of fear, Will. And the thing about it is, they seem to defy our laws of physics. These entities seem to be able to appear and disappear at will. Because when I refused to go with them, I showed resentment. Even though I was fearful, these entities seem to just vanish, like into thin air.
So you would actually watch them and fade out of reality, or you would just, you'd look behind you and all of a sudden they were gone when you looked back?
They just vanished right before my eyes. I mean, into thin air.
Okay.
And did the doorway vanish, or the?
They seemed to get, well. They started to enter the doorway, all three of them, and then they just, I couldn't see them anymore. And the next thing I knew, I was in my bed, sleeping and waking up and trying to, scratching my head, wondering what was going on, what had just happened, the night before, because I was 3 years, like 3 years old, I had no idea what to make of that.
Okay, so this is your first experience, but of course your life has been peppered throughout with these different run-ins with, I guess you would call UFOs and aliens. So how did this progress? I mean, obviously this left a large impression on you as a child, which one that you probably didn't really understand until you were older. How did this progress? What was the next thing to happen?
Well, I had a lot of experiences throughout my childhood, primarily in my teenage years, for the most part, which were of a paranormal nature or parapsychological. One of the most common things that happened to me now, and a lot of people consider this a natural thing, and it can be, but I experienced what they call sleeping paralysis quite a bit. And when I would have these experiences, one of several things would happen. Number one, I would either wake up and have to feel a presence in the room and hear voices, or I would wake up and see black, shadowy figures in the room. Unable to move, I'd feel pressure on my chest. There'd be kind of it's really hard, a smell in the room. It's just really hard to describe sometimes. It's kind of a putrid sulfur smell, or it's really hard to describe. It smelled terrible. I remember that sometimes. And then sometimes I would even wake up with the sensation of levitation, which was very disturbing. And every time I had this experience, whether I saw things or I heard something or I smelled something odd, or I would have a tremendous sense of fear, unlike anything I've experienced in my entire life.
That is interesting.
So you would describe it as an unnatural fear?
Well, the thing is, the thing about it is, Ryan and Will, after over the years, as I've gotten older, I've done a lot of research over the past several years. I think there's two sides to this issue. I think that what I was experiencing was physiological, but I think there is also parapsychological. Also, I think these entities, whatever they are, capitalize on human physiology, and because after your body goes into REM state, it's to my understanding that your body basically shuts down to a certain degree. And if you awaken during that point, like sometimes the rest of your body stays shut down.
Yeah, there's a mechanism in your brain that keeps you from moving around in your sleep, and sleepwalkers have a problem with that part of their brain. But yeah, go ahead.
And I have sleptwalked before. I do have sleeping disorders, but I can tell you straight up that what I experienced was real, because I remember one instance when I was about 12 or 13. After having a bout with this sleeping paralysis, I woke up and I had a strange mark on my right wrist, and it was a very peculiar looking mark. It just literally appeared overnight. I didn't puncture myself. I didn't injure myself in any way. It's still there today.
So did it look like a grab mark, or was it a tool mark?
Well, it looked like a scuff mark, or a scoop mark or something. But it's kind of round, about the size of a pencil head, eraser head rather. It's got two little marks on top, and then a little mark at the bottom. It almost looks like a frowny face or a neutral face or something, like somebody drew it on me. It's really weird looking.
So it's not something that, it's not, your hand was positioned in a weird way against, a blanket or something like that. Obviously, if it left an impression that you still have today, it's something almost like a scar, and it would obviously, it must look like it was made by something intelligent.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, it's never gone away. It looks like it's been altered a little bit, actually. When I'm sitting here, I'm actually sitting here looking at it real time, and it looks a little bit different than it used to. It's still round in its shape, but it does have some indentions in it. I see some indentions in it, and I see something at the bottom. It looks like it was put there by something, like intentionally, like something did it to me intentionally.
So while you feel that there is a definite psychological a psychological phenomenon going on here, you also feel that this is something that exists in the physical realm as well. Obviated by that, the physical evidence, I guess, left on your wrist.
That is correct. I believe there's a physical and an interdimensional explanation for this, for sure.
And actually, there, I think a good point to start with, because Mark, we spoke about this last week, and I know where the story is going to go, and part of it, part of the story that we have to get to before we get to the crux of the story, which, of course, involves what you had witnessed while in the military, which, no other way to put it than it looked like a cover-up of what you've experienced.
Oh, absolutely. But there's a lot more to it.
Definitely there is. But
even before that.
Exactly. And the part of the story that I want to start with right now, because it directly ties into, I guess, your theory that's going to come out at the end, is your experience that you had with a Ouija board.
Right. And I want to make mention, I've never been one to practice the occult. I do this out of mere curiosity. One of my friends who's a proven, I used to be friends with, well, it's a woman I used to be work with, and I used to be friends with. She was a medium and a psychic, and she proved it to me in many different ways, her abilities. She told me, she told me things about me that nobody could know. I mean, there's just absolutely no way. it was kind of reminiscent of the CIA psychic studies back in the 70s. I don't know if there are listeners can go back and do some Google research. They can actually find out about that. But at any rate, yeah. So I had a friend of mine that I worked with. She actually was having a lot. She told me she was having a lot of paranormal activity in her home and poltergeist style activity, and she invited me over after work one night. It was fairly late, around 10:30, 11 o'clock-ish, right in the middle of the Georgia summer. It's pretty warm and humid outside. We were out there in her living room, me, her, and about two other people, and I had a curiosity. She had a Ouija board, and she wanted me to participate in it, and I out of curiosity, I agreed to participate in it, and we evidently, the phenomenon's real, because the planchette did seem to move all by itself with some force. Because I was looking at everybody's hands, and I could feel other people's hands, and they were just their fingers were barely touching it, just like mine. And we were communicating with something. I can't tell you what it is. I have my own theories of what it is, but it wasn't anything positive. I can tell you that. It was we were asking it questions, and then all of a sudden it started playing at me and told me to open the door. Well, I went to the door, and lo and behold, there was somebody at the door, which is, kind of interesting, because this girl, where she lives, she has a long driveway, and you can't really hear anybody pulling up at the street to park in the street, because her driveway is completely filled up with cars, and anybody who pulled up would have to park in the street. There's no way, we could even hear it. So I let this person in, and it was another woman, in her 20s that I worked with, and she came in and jumped in on the action. And the next thing I knew, it was about 10 minutes later, it was asking me to open the door again. Well, this time, I had a kind of a nervous feeling about it, because I'm like, why is it so interested in me all of a sudden, So I opened the door, and this time there was nobody there. But, it was about a 90-degree evening. It is right in the middle of the Georgia summer. It was very hot and humid still, even at 10 o'clock at night. And this rush of really cold air just came in and just hit me like a freight train. Like, it was just, I had chills all over my body. And that right there was enough for me. I mean, that was it. I was done.
And Mark, just to be clear, these two times that you answered the door, you were being asked by the Ouija board to go, like, that you were wanted at the door.
That is correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the first time when it asked you it asked you to get the door, it was, you were surprised to find somebody there, because there wasn't really any sound or indication that someone was there. It was someone that you knew, and you just kind of, put it in the back of your head, coincidence. Kind of strange, the Ouija board mentions it, and there's someone there. But the second time you open the door, there's nobody there, and on this hot summer's night, there's this cold breeze that comes in and just, shivers you to the bone.
Absolutely, and that's a perfect description of what happened. This is as paranormal as anything that's ever happened to me. I mean, it totally defies the laws of physics as far as I'm concerned, because it's just not possible. There's no cold front moving through. There's, it was a very hot, humid night. There's nothing else, no other way to describe the incident.
So did you get the sense that there was a presence in the room afterwards?
Oh, yeah. There was definitely a presence in the room. There was definitely. It wasn't very active when I was at that point. But But I mean, when we heard some noises, things kind of moving around in other rooms, we did kind of hear some what we thought was some kind of parapsychological activity going on to some degree. But what really cooked my goose was when I left. Yeah, after that, I was kind of spooked out a little bit. I mean, I decided it was time for me to go. So, yeah, I'm letting you know I'm heading out. I'm going home. And, you know, I was getting ready to go out of town the next day, and yeah, I'm going to go home and just get some sleep. By then it was like 12:30 in the morning. So as I'm driving home, we live in the same subdivision. It's a big country club, and it's huge. And she lived literally on one side of it, and I lived on the other side. So I was driving home, and as I'm driving home, I'm looking at the street lights. And as I'm driving, one set after another of the lights just go out. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Excuse me. So, as I was driving home, these streetlights kept going out, and I got home. I was very tired, very weary from the day because I'd done worked, you know, a 10-hour day plus, you know, hung out with those girls, my friends, for 3 hours, 4 hours, and I was tired. I laid my head down. I instantly fell into sleep, real deep sleep, and I went into a dreamscape. I guess what you call it, lucid dreaming. And in the dream, I mean, it just started immediately. I mean, it started like right after I laid my head down. I started this dream, and it was like I was there. And in the dream, the woman, I'm going to call her Carla, and this other girl's Jeannie. I'm going to call her Jeannie. They were sitting there, and the planchette was in the middle of the Ouija board spinning really, really fast. And they were in a trance-like state. And then all of a sudden, this planchette flies off in my direction. And then I woke up. I physically woke up. I wasn't having sleeping paralysis. I actually sat up in bed. And I looked to my right, and I could see one of these gray entities standing right next to my bed. And, you know, I have a Christian upbringing. I do have some religious philosophy and beliefs. I started calling out to the name of Jesus, and this entity just kind of vanished into thin air. I mean, it almost looked like it was knocked down by something, and it was gone. And after that, some things in my room started moving around by themselves, and then that was it. The experience was terminated.
So the interesting point, just to make here for everybody listening, because this will, something that will come out later on in the episode, but the fact that, you're fooling around with a Ouija board, which, typically gets associated with demonic activity, but in this case, we're not talking about demons that you see physically, but alien grays.
Well, whatever they are, whatever the kind of entities these things are, I mean, it seemed to defy the known laws of physics that flesh and blood entities would be subject to in our atmosphere on our planet, and it just disappeared.
But you did describe it though as looking like a typical gray, correct?
Yeah, it had big black eyes. Large, roundish, almond-shaped head. I mean, it was a typical you would see on the X-Files or,
which was the same thing that you see when you were a child?
That's affirmative. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's basically what I wanted to highlight here is that the Ouija board, which is typically, when we picture a demon, we don't typically picture an alien. They're usually separate subjects. But in this case, that's the connection. So after we have this, you have this experience, I mean, obviously, this stuck with you as well. What came next? Like, what happened after this?
Well, the next major event was very odd. it wasn't as laced with paranormal as the last thing I mentioned, but it's significant in any regards. Basically, it was probably a few months after that event. It was a Sunday evening, probably around 7 or 8 o'clock. I was watching a movie. I was still with my parents at the time. Basically, I heard the garage door open, and I wanted to go say hi to him. And before I could even get off my chair, they said, "Mark, come take a look at this." I heard him talking, with a loud voice. They said, "Come out here and look at this." And so I was like, what are they wanting me to do? I don't want to go outside. It's nasty outside. So I go in the garage, the garage was opened up, and lo and behold, I'm just going to tell you where it was. It was a flying saucer. Probably about, I would say it was about 1.5 clicks away, which in military terms would be about 1,000 paces. So I would say it was somewhere around maybe a little over 1,000 yards away, but I could see it just plain as day. It was still a little bit light outside. It was had a strobe on it, no sound. What it was, I have no freaking clue. I couldn't even begin to tell you. But the odd thing about the experience was you don't ever remember seeing it. As a matter of fact, the next thing I remember after seeing that, I was thinking about going because it wasn't too far away. I could have walked to it pretty, to the area I was in pretty swiftly, and it was the next thing I remember was sitting down on my chair and with the TV off, and mom and dad's in bed getting ready to go to sleep, and I was like, "Where'd the UFO go?" They're like, "What are you talking about?" And it was just real. It was like, like an hour and a half went by, and I don't remember anything.
So in both cases, as a child, and again now, when aliens as a child and a UFO, now you have missing time in between, like when you see this, and then when suddenly you're somewhere else and you don't know how you got from point A to point B.
Well, this is the first time I actually remember missing time per se. I don't know if I had any missing time in any of the other experiences. I honestly couldn't tell you. I remember being vividly awake the 2 times I saw these. I remember seeing these entities. But this time, all I remember is seeing just an unusually shaped craft, and it just seemed out of place. We have an air reserve base on the north side of town, about 30 minutes away from where we were living, but it didn't look like anything I've seen, our Air Force testing. Because
so
I didn't have a
look
security clearance.
Did the craft look solid, or was it just a light?
No, there was a craft. It was a craft, and there was a glowing strobe on the bottom of it and on the top. There was a small one on the top and some bigger one on the bottom. I remember. I can recall.
So the point at which you saw the craft, and like again, this is when we have the missing time, correct?
That's affirmative. That's the first time I ever remember having any sort of missing time.
Okay, so when after this had happened, and you had mentioned to your parents, just remember this UFO. I guess like anyone would, just to get their thoughts about it or what they had thought, but they didn't remember this.
No, they did not. Not at all. As a matter of fact, like I even asked my dad about a couple months ago. It's like, "Hey, Dad, do you remember that flying saucer we saw over where we used to live on the other side of town?" And he's like, "No." And my mother doesn't remember it either. So I've tried to talk to her about it several times, and she just thinks it's nonsense, which I understand.
Certainly. But I mean, it must be frustrating because they called you out to see it. I mean, they were there originally.
Yeah, it is. It is aggravating. Because I think, I don't want to get too far into it yet, for the story's sake, but I think that might be my first involvement with Black Ops technology. And I think some parts of our government, the United States government, knew somehow that I was an experiencer and wanted to see how I would react to it. That's why I'm starting to wonder.
Do you think it's possible? And now, because we're talking about, throughout your life, like I said earlier, you had this UFO phenomena peppered throughout. But I mean, you've experienced it as young as, I believe you said you were 3. So,
right. I never really saw a UFO per se.
But
most of my experiences were nocturnal stuff in the bed, in my room. There was one time I thought I saw some lights outside my window, some unusual looking lights, but other than that, I've never really seen. That was my first unidentified flying object I've seen.
But you saw
hands down.
You saw what you would describe as the grays as a 3-year-old.
Exactly.
Which are, related to the UFO phenomenon. So, I mean, did you ever feel like, you were chosen? You were chosen to be made aware of these things? Because I always find in cases of, people who have experience with being abducted, with seeing UFOs and aliens, it's never one occurrence. It's, it's like you, it's several different run-ins throughout their life. So, I mean, do you feel chosen? Do you feel like there was some reason why, they made themselves, or they made you aware of them?
That's a good question. I think there's different answers to that question. I think that sometimes people are chosen, and some people are drawn into it based on their lifestyle decisions. And that's one of the reasons I never advocate people practicing the occult, because everybody I know and have learned of who's practiced the occult has had some kind of negative impact on their life. Either it's just playing with a Ouija board or whatever.
Now, outside of the Ouija board experience that you've relayed to us earlier, I mean, would you say that growing up you had typically been, not really into the paranormal? I mean, a more, realistic point of view, or I guess accepted point of view?
Well, I mean, I've had a moderate interest in the paranormal, but it's not like it has been the last 4 or 5 years of my life, where I've been studying it and researching it, and even done a few investigations with some people. But in general, I had when I was a kid, I had my mind on girls, playing Nintendo, and thinking about what I wanted to do with my life in general.
Okay, so after you had this experience, I guess we would fast forward now to when you joined the military, because this is what you decided you wanted to do with your life.
Absolutely. Come from a long line of military service. My dad, he's in the Navy. Had several uncles who served during Vietnam. My grandfather served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And my great uncle was in World War II at Normandy. He was an infantryman. He was an Army Ranger, and he hit the beach with the best of them. And so he was kind of my inspiration, more or less, more than anyone, because I wanted to be the first infantryman in the family since him. So I joined the Army, signed up for infantry, and I got MOS queued with two jobs, which is 11 Bravo, which is light infantry, and 11 Mike, which is mechanized infantry. And I did get a security clearance. I don't know why they issued me a secret security clearance, but they did. My brother served in the military. One of my older brothers, he was an officer. He was a civil officer, which is kind of comes into play later. I think a little bit. He had a much higher security clearance than I had, and he's been to places like Chinook and Area 51, Grim Lake, Fort Huachuca, Arizona, some real big high security places. But anyways, so yeah, I joined the service. I signed for infantry. I went through 14 weeks of boot camp hell at Fort Benning at the Sand Hill Post, where all the infantrymen go. Basically, it's just a long 14-week long basic training, and then you graduate, and then you go to your combat unit, and that's pretty much it. I started out in the National Guard component of the Army. I wanted to kind of get my feet wet with that, and then transferred to active duty afterwards, which I eventually did. So in the reserves, the National Guard component of the Army, you have 2 weeks of mandatory active duty you have to attend. So my first one is at Fort Stewart, Georgia. So at Fort Stewart, you have the 3rd Infantry Division, and then you have what's called Hunter Army Airfield. And it's a big airstrip, and a lot of people deploy out of that airstrip to go to Europe and other parts of the world. The 75th Ranger Regiment also has their rapid deployment unit there. But anyways, we were doing what we call a field training exercise out in this range, which is probably about 5 clicks away from the airstrip. It's a big range. It's called the Osera Range, and it was swampy, and then it had some hills, and it had been some areas where it just kind of cleared out, and it was an ideal training place for infantry. Getting ready to practice their battle drills and whatnot. And so we were out there. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were getting ready to do to exercise what we call in the infantry battle drill alpha, and we were executing the exercise, which takes up to 3 hours, depending on what the enemy's doing. The enemies were portrayed by our Op 4 operatives, which is people posing as the enemy, basically. Some officers, some range cadre evaluating us, basically. So my squad leader went out to do what's called the leader's recon, and he was checking out, seeing what the enemy was doing, communicating with other squads and other part of our platoon. We were getting ready to lay down fire on the enemy, and my squad leader looked at me and said, "You know what, Brenner, stay right here. I'm going to see what's going on. Sergeant so-and-so was out there for a long time. We're going to see what's going on with him. I'll be right back." So I was just kind of hanging out there, chilling like a villain, leaning up against a tree out in the middle of this small clearing, and all of a sudden, I got this overwhelming feeling like I was being watched. I felt this really strong magnetic charge in the air, like the usual sounds you'd hear out there in Fort Stewart, like even crickets or whatever, and wildlife, because there's deer and all kinds of wildlife out there. I mean, you could hear a sound. And I looked up, and just out of nowhere, there's this triangular-shaped dark object with a faint glow at the bottom of it. I looked up at it. It was probably about 100 feet away, above the wood line of the clearing that I was in, and all of a sudden, I just blacked out. The next thing I knew, I was being picked up off the ground with my weapon, my M16, hanging off of me. in my rucksack off the ground by my squad leader. It was a sergeant, an E5 sergeant. That was a very odd experience. And in a nutshell, that's what happened initially with that experience.
Now, you relayed this, not right away, but you did tell this story to your sergeant. You explained what you had seen. What was his reaction? What did he say?
Well, he kind of brushed it off. I'm wondering if he saw the same thing and didn't know what to make of it. But what I've learned in the military is when you see something that you think you're not supposed to, you keep your mouth shut. And I was kind of, he was like, I don't know what's going on, what's up with you, you're passed out. We don't. And basically, kind of shrugged it off, and then later that morning, an hour later, I was told I was sent back to these old World War II barracks that's on the base in the main post. And then I was told to report to my company executive officer, and after that, things kind of got blurry. I don't know what the heck happened. What I did, I don't remember if I got briefed or what happened. Over the next several days, it was real blurry because I honestly can't recall what I did, where I was at on the base, if I was still on the base, what happened.
I find it interesting that in some circles, the black triangles are sometimes referred to as ARVs or alien reproduction vehicles. There are quite a few people who believe that the black triangles are human-made versions of the UFO.
Yes, they are. I have confirmed that through some sources. Yes, that is correct. They operate with anti-gravity propulsion. I have my suspicions of where the technology came from, which I can get into later if you want me to.
And for anybody who is interested in anti-gravity propulsion, definitely go and do a little search on electrogravitics. That's the actual term that is used, a scientific term for anti-gravity is electrogravitics. It is a real thing. It does exist. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, well, that's something that we'll come back to. But if we could, so going back to you're picked up by your sergeant. You tell him what happened. He brushes it off, and then you have 3 days or so that you're really mentally hazy. You don't really know where you're at, what's going on. But of course, a lot of big changes came for you regarding the military after this. I mean, it goes right into a conspiracy. If we could pick up right there where you're...
Sure, absolutely. Well, after that experience, I had a feeling that I was debriefed to a certain degree and possibly given sodium pentothal, because I've heard some soldiers being given sodium pentothal after being in certain situations. They didn't trust them to stay quiet about it, and it's commonly used as a truth serum, but I think it's also used for brainwashing. I don't know enough about the drug to make any more comments on it, but from what I have learned about it, I believe it's possible that they could have given me that or something like it.
But you do feel that you were drugged in either case?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
And no coincidence.
And I think
no coincidence after seeing that.
Well, no, there's not. I think that whatever that was I got too close to it, and I believe that very strongly that it's caused me some physiological and emotional issues. Because ever since then, I've had worsening heart issues. I've had panic attacks. I've had nightmares. It all started. My general health in general started declining, and I was in great shape. Like there's no excuse for it.
Yeah, the way that you explained it to me is that you were at the prime of your life health wise. Before this had happened, you had this run in with the UFO, but it wasn't the UFO. It was the magnetic, overwhelming sensation of some kind of magnetic, I guess, radiation or something that came from the craft. After which, the way that you explained it to me, your heart issues, you told me it was all of a sudden you had not tachycardia, atrial fibrillation, was it?
It was, well, I'd had I liked tachycardia beforehand, but the thing about it is, it was something that really bothered me. And then it turned into what's called a supraventricular tachycardia. Any EMTs out there and nurses and doctors would know what that is, the difference between the two different types of tachycardias. Basically what happens is my heart will start beating, and it'll start beating so fast that it'll beat up to 270, 280 beats a minute. And I basically feel like I'm going to fall out. And essentially, about a year later, within a year later, I transferred to active duty like I had said I was going to. I was in the process of going through a school in Texas where I was going to become basically a healthcare specialist or a combat medic, depending on where I got assigned to. And I was doing a routine PT test, and I fell out of a run. And I'd never done it before. I've always had great scores on my PT test. I was in good shape. I started having a tachycardia, and I was trying to push myself and to get through this PT test so I wouldn't fall out, and I just lost it and just conked out, basically, and crashed on the side of the road. And that's when I started having more panic attacks. I started going to see doctors, Army doctors, an Army psychiatrist. I told the psychiatrist everything that happened, like everything I could remember, and some details about my childhood. And it wasn't very long after those doctor visits that I found out I was being discharged. And my company commander was recommending me an honorable discharge under medical circumstances, but on my separation papers, this is kind of interest to a lot of people, and a lot of people are really puzzled by this. When you get out of the military, you get what's called a DD-214. The DD-214 paper has 3 columns of interest. There's the separation, the reasons for separation, and then there's what's called separation code. Now, the separation, instead of being honorable for medical conditions or general or whatever, it was uncharacterized. It literally said that. And I had never seen that before. Like, nobody I've shown my 214 to had seen that before. And underneath that, for the reason for separation, it said a physical condition, not a disability. And that's where they got me. Because of that, I lost my VA benefits. I lost my 2.5 years of which I deserve of military benefits. My country screwed me out of it.
And of course, there's a more surprising element to this as well. There was something you were
Yes. Absolutely. I know exactly where we're going. So when I was out processing to get that paper, one of the standard procedure is you go to the clinic where they keep your medical records, and you get a copy of your medical records. Well, guess what? They were quote unquote lost. I was like, I just saw the doctor the other day. What's up with this? And nobody had a clue or seemed to have a clue as to why my medical documents had just simply vanished. And that's just something that doesn't happen.
Yes, because
We're
as
talking about soldiers' livelihood here.
because as you told me, when you are discharged from the Army, you get your medical records so that you can take them to your doctor. Right? So, I mean, these things don't disappear. And yet you're here.
Exactly.
And yet here you are, and yours are gone.
So you feel that your records were either sanitized or from the system, or had been made classified for some reason?
They were definitely classified, because they're not going to get rid of the records. They're going to my theory, and a lot of people have concurred with me that I've spoken to, who's in the know a little bit, is that someone did not want these records being released. Therefore, they revoked my security clearance, and that to cover it up, they sealed them and then sent them somewhere.
So as if,
and I think that's what happened.
Well,
so you feel that perhaps the physical medical conditions that you suffer from after the experience with the Black Triangle, they were probably linked directly to the triangle being there, and that kind of information. The physical changes that would go on in a person's body after being exposed to either extraterrestrial technology or some form of exotic clandestine technology would therefore cause your records to be classified, because it would be,
Oh, absolutely. And it won't be the
offering a
first time
window.
it's happened. It would not be the first time it's happened, Ryan. It would. There's been a lot of circumstances over the years. I'll give you a great example. There was actually, and this was on Unsolved Mysteries, back in the 80s. It happened in the early 80s, I believe. Woman was driving around Texas with her grandson, or I think her mother, and she came in contact with some kind of Black Ops craft or drone or something. And it was like a diamond-shaped craft, and it was ours. I know it was ours. I have 99.9% chance it was ours. This object was followed by helicopters, and she came in contact. She got out of her car, and her and everybody in the vehicle got deathly ill. And she actually got out of the car and approached this thing, and she got cancer. Unfortunately, years later, the government totally denied having anything to do with it.
I remember that episode.
Yeah, so I do believe some people believe that was a prototype or a precursor to what is typically referred to as the TR-3B Aurora, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Without saying too much, I can tell you the Aurora project is real. It is in effect. It's been in effect for a long time.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what the Aurora project is or was?
Well, I have very limited information on it, but I can tell you it does involve clandestine technology. It does involve some of it involves anti-gravity technology, which is similar to that of what the Nazis discovered in Nazi Germany back in before and during World War II.
With the German Bell and the Foo Fighters.
Yes, they were. I know the Germans were working on a weapon that was supposed to end the war, and they called it the Wunderwaffe. And it was they had a scientist named Victor Schauberger working for them, and he discovered how anti-gravity works, and it's actually quite simple. If you have a vortex-like device that holds something that conducts electricity, such as mercury, for example, or water. When that stuff spins around in it, after a while, when it does it creates an intense electromagnetic field, which distorts space-time and cancels gravity. Well, he figured out how it worked. Then the Nazis pretty much took that and ran with it. And after the war, we brought a lot of their scientists over here. Then we had to start with NASA, and technology just exploded. And I think that's where a lot of these clandestine black ops programs come from.
I would agree with that.
So, going back to after you had been, I mean, you're out of the military now. Your medical papers are gone, so you can't even go to a doctor, and they don't know your history. So again, like they have, they have nothing to work with. It's all new. You did ask your brother though, and your brother was in the military, and you asked him about
Yes.
the code that they gave you when they sent you on your way. And now he has a higher security clearance. I mean, he is more in the know, correct?
Well, my older brother, who I won't mention his name, he was a 7th Corps officer. He was stationed at Fort Huachuca, which is the home of the Army Military Intelligence. Fort Huachuca is near Tucson. For those of you who don't know where that base is, it's near Tucson. There's a lot of intel that goes in and out of that place. Underneath that base and a bunch of other places, there's also hidden underground installations. It goes to anywhere from Los Alamos to Area 51, Tinnapock, any of those places. They're really clandestine. Any of the top secret testing areas and whatnot. He's been to a lot of these places. He's told me he's been to Area 51. I kind of gave him a whiff of what happened to me because it's really hard for me to talk to my brother about things. I just don't have that trust with him. With what he had his hands into, and what he knew, what I think he knew at least. He pretty much told me that he's heard of this stuff happen before, and there's a reason what happened to me happened to me, and that's pretty much it.
So just to I guess to bring everything back, I mean, for everybody wondering, I guess, what the point of the Ouija board was. Now you have a philosophy on how Ouija, not just a Ouija board, but like demonic activity and all of those things relate to aliens and UFOs.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely able to elaborate on that for you. So, after having all this happen to me, I've had 2 unsuccessful marriages. I've had a lot of really awful things happen to me in my life since then. I've been in and out of, I've been in a mental institution once. I've had lots of emotional issues. I started looking into things about 6 years ago, roughly. I started researching the paranormal, all aspects of it, everything from ghosts, what people would call ghosts at least, demons, extraterrestrials, UFOs, et cetera. And I've kind of put a lot of pieces of this puzzle together, and I've just seen a lot of gray area. Where we're talking about the occult, ETs, so-called ETs, I should say, poltergeist activity, so-called ghosts, shadow figure, shadow men is what they call them, I think. Demonic activity, demonic possession. I've seen a lot of common gray area here, and it seems to me that these entities, based on my experiences and everything I've learned over the past 5 years, that these entities, number one, are liars. And that goes back to biblical references of the devil and fallen angels. They mix lies with the truth and they deceive people. For example, the contactees of the 50s. Let's go back then. Back then, no one would dare question these entities. Because, if an entity appeared before you and you didn't, they told you they said, they're from the planet Mars. Well, who's to say they're not? What Well, as technology evolved and our astronomy got better, well, we discovered Zeta Reticuli, and we discovered Alpha Centauri, and all these other star systems, which are magnificent things to look at in a telescope. But they changed. The entities seem to change their story, and they keep telling different things. They say they're from all these different places in the universe, and they can't seem to get their story together. Number two, if they were flesh and blood ETs, okay, they'd be subject to our laws of physics, okay, and I'll elaborate on that. A flesh and blood person or a biological person or entity of any type simply cannot go through a wall, through a window, or anything. That right there tells me that in nature that this is some sort of interdimensional phenomenon. Okay? Now, also, the same people who have experiences like mine and so-called alien abduction phenomenon experience poltergeist activity, in rare cases demonic possession. I have had my share of poltergeist things happen to me over the years. It's not been a constant thing. However, I have had poltergeist activity happen, especially during my last marriage, when it was just a terrible marriage to be in. It was all kinds of really bad things going on. Coffee mugs would fly across the table by themselves, doors were slammed shut, et cetera, et cetera. I just see, I'm just giving you an example from my personal vision of this, okay?
Yep.
I just see so much gray area, and I'm putting these pieces of the puzzle together. And my personal belief, and I don't expect anybody to believe me, and to particularly believe this theory, but my theory is that this is an interdimensional, possibly demonic phenomenon, and then the other half is something that we have created, such as the triangles that me and Ryan were talking about there. So that is my theory of the whole paranormal UFO ET theory. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's entirely possible. There could be ETs out there. But here's the thing. For them to be able to fold time-space to get to us, just from the nearest star system, let's take Alpha Centauri, okay? Where these liars have told us they're from. It would take more energy than our sun produces in a year to make that happen. And I don't even think these entities would survive the transaction. That's just my that's another thing. It's very possible that God created life on another planet, and maybe it had evolved in some way. But I'm just going to tell you, I don't believe it. That's the case here on Earth. I think we're dealing with interdimensional entities.
Well, definitely one thing that I will throw into the mix there is that it does seem that people who have UFO activity and paranormal activity, it seems like there's a lot of people that don't have just one or just the other. They have a mix. I mean, even speaking from my own point of view, I have seen a UFO, and I've had a handful of paranormal experiences as well. So, and again, not many people have just one experience. It's usually several. So there definitely is a lot of things to think about. Like your whole connecting of aliens to demonic activity actually reminds me a lot of the Jinn, which was another blanket term to explain all paranormal phenomenon. So it is a school of thought that is shared by many different people. Is there anything else though that you'd like to share, Mark, before we clue this up?
Well, yeah, I will say this. You're talking about the Jinn. I think that's a very interesting thing. I know a lot of people of the faith of Islamic faith believe in Jinn. I have several friends of that faith. And my faith is a Christian, I believe in fallen angels. Well, they all seem very similar to me, if you think about it. Angels are entities that can make themselves superior however they want to. I think once you've fallen far from God, I think that in His light, I think that at one point that your appearances degrade also. I think that these entities can make themselves look like an alien or make us believe they're aliens. I think they can make themselves think they're a ghost of a dead relative. I think they can make themselves think they're a human being. That comes from faith. That strictly comes from faith, and that is I'm not dictating to anybody what to believe at all. But that's something that I would like to add in at the end.
Okay, so I mean, what for everybody listening out there? I mean, most of you have listened to many of our shows. You've heard lots of different theories. I would be interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think that aliens are a separate issue from demonic activity, separate from ghosts? Do you think that they're all the same entity wrapped up under different names? I mean, what does everybody else think? And with that said, if any of you have any of your own effed up stories or videos, pictures, or what have you, we do ask that you submit it to us at effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And Mark, I want to thank you for coming on to the show and sharing your experience. And also on that topic, if anyone else out there who's in the know regarding the military, if you have any information on the code that Mark was given when he was separated from the military, or what that means, or what it possibly means, I'd be interested to hear that too. And with that having been said, thanks again, Mark, for coming on to the show. And this is Will signing out.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so very welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And, as is with the paranormal, there are so many overlapping themes and whatnot. And I guess all we can do is keep vigilant and try and figure this out. One of the greatest mysteries that mankind has ever faced. Thank you, everyone.
Amen to
My
that.
name's Ryan Sharp. Good night.
Good night, everybody.